So, good afternoon, everyone. I am responsible for the Inquiring Minds monthly series, which comes to you under the auspices of Toronto Mensa. My name is Kathleen Smith. I warmly welcome you to this Zoom edition of the series. It's my pleasure to introduce our two panelists, Philip Shepard and Andrei Yakovenko. And they are co-authors of a book called Deep Fitness. Wonder if you can see that clearly. Believe you can. The subtitle is The Mindful Science-Based Strength Training Method to Transform Your Well-Being in Just 30 Minutes a Week. So that's the first part of my introduction. Philip Shepard is an expert on the embodiment present process, which he developed over the course of 40 years of teaching embodiment practices. He and his wife, Alison Woodruff, are the co-directors of workshops and facilitator trainings that they offer worldwide. In fact, Philip was just telling me he's just flown back from Arizona on time to do this talk today. Philip is also the author of two books, Radical Wholeness and New Self, New World, on the subject of our culture's disembodiment. Andrei Yakovenko is originally from Ukraine and is now living permanently in Canada. He obtained a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Toronto, went to graduate school at McMaster University, and then he built a successful career as a partner in a geophysics business. Eventually, he was introduced to the principles of high-intensity strength training and recruited some friends to put these principles into practice together as a group for a year. And he was so impressed with this experience that he delved deeply into how this type of training can be used to lead to health benefits. What he learned inspired him to leave his career and open a group of high-intensity strength training studios, which he calls New Element Training, in the Toronto, Canada area. So welcome, Philip Shepard and Andrei Yakovenko.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, Kathleen.
Thank you, Kathleen. Same here.
Okay, welcome to both of you. I'm going to start out with some questions for each of you. Andrei, I'm going to ask you a question first. You built your successful and, I understand, lucrative career as a partner in a geophysics business. What is geophysics? And can you tell us something about one or two of the projects that you were involved in?
Yes, of course, Kathleen. Well, geophysics is simply a merge of two disciplines, geology and physics, for the purpose of mostly exploration. And exploration could be just remote sensing, could be mineral oil exploration of sorts, where you use remote sensing to gather data, process it, interpret it, and that will tell you something about the geology, the composition of the rocks. I kind of accidentally ended up in that field. My major actually was archaeological sciences, and I did a couple minors. One of them was geology, and I kind of really enjoyed geology. And at some point in my last year, a couple geology professors approached me and asked me if I wanted to be their students in the grad school. Then I thought, maybe that's what I'm gonna do. So I found a supervisor at McMaster who did this work underwater, and in my previous life I also used to teach scuba diving. So he was geologist but working underwater with archaeologists, telling something about human past from geological perspective. And so I got into the grad school at the McMaster, and that eventually, one of the other process, being a grad school, I took a class on geophysics. And then basically a year or so later, I got a job in this field so-called airborne geophysics. Basically, it's a subdivision of geophysics where you put instrumentations on small aircrafts, helicopters, small airplanes, and you fly fairly close to the ground, grid-like patterns, collect the data, and deliver to the client. So that's essentially, it was a startup. So I got into that company at the earlier stages, and I really enjoyed it so much. For me, it was like going on a vacation. I've seen more of Canada and North America and the world than probably most people just in the first 2-3 years, because you do so much fieldwork, travel everywhere. Yeah, so in terms of couple projects, for the most part, I spent time at Northwest Territories. We had a long-term client there, which was lots of fun. But again, you kind of live in remote locations. You wake up, you send a pilot to the survey area, make sure everything is working properly, wait for the pilot to come back, you take the data, you process the data, make sure everything is working nice, no errors, and then you gather the data, you finish the project. There's lots of noise in the process of collecting the data, so there's quite a bit of data processing. And once you clean everything, you deliver client in kind of the final product, the final maps for their interpretation. That's kind of what I used to do.
Okay, that's a really complete description. Thank you. I had no idea. Philip, you are a leader in the embodiment movement worldwide. And later on, I'm going to be asking you to talk to us about embodiment. However, for now, I've taken note that you were active professionally in many aspects of theater, including acting, writing plays, and even founding a theater company. Can you tell us something about the roles that you played on stage and about the plays that you wrote?
I'd be delighted to. As a playwright, I seem to be drawn to the classics. I adapted Beowulf. When I say adapted, it was a modern story that was inspired by the chronology and the events in Beowulf, and I did a similar play as an adaptation of the Odyssey, and just loved it. I wrote and acted in both of those, and other roles I've done. I guess the role that I thrived on, it was an adaptation of Faust, not Goethe's Faust, but Marlowe's Faust. And the two Fausts are very different. Goethe's Faust is this very virtuous man who is subject to a bet and is trying to be corrupted. Marlowe's Faust is this thoroughly modern man who is brilliant and has mastered every form of knowledge there is and wants more, and turns to the dark arts and summons Mephistopheles. And in Marlowe's treatment, he says, Mephistopheles, I want you to be my servant. And Mephistopheles says to him, Faust, don't do this. He tries to talk him out of it. And Faust will have none of it. Take my soul. What the heck is a soul? I want to be all powerful. And it was adapted for two actors, one Faust and one Mephistopheles. And I played Faust, and we ran that in Chicago for 6 weeks and in Toronto for 3 weeks. And I was like a pig in mud. I just had the greatest time in that. And for the whole of my career as an actor, theater was the most valuable mentor I could have had, because every theater exercise, every role you're given is just another opportunity to explore what it means to be present in a different context, in a different way. And that training in presence, of course, is what led to my teachings and my trainings in embodiment.
Oh, beautiful. How did the two of you meet?
I got an email.
Philip. Oh yeah, okay. You go ahead.
Okay, you can chime in. I got an email. We have a mutual friend, and I run a gym with an unusual workout, and I'd like. Would you be interested to come and I could show you the workout? Well, at this point, I didn't honestly have much use for gyms. I didn't like the culture and the noise and the music, but I'm up for anything. So I walk into this gym, and it is quiet, and there's no music, there are no mirrors, there are no video screens. And Andrei, bless him, put me through a workout. I was more alive doing that workout than I'd been in months. My whole body responded. And Andrei, God bless him, said, well, if you'd like to come back again, you're welcome to. And so I became a frequent visitor to Andrei's gym. Andrei, do you want to take it over from there?
Yeah, so what led me to send that email to Philip is jumping, leaving my business in geophysics and entering the field. I had zero experience, gym business, fitness business. It was pure passion. I knew like this time in my career, in my life, I wanted to do something I was passionate about. It wasn't just simply about for the sake of making money. And this style of training at that time, and still is, was something that like I would spend all my free time reading more and more and more. Like I was so passionate about it. So I decided to gamble. I did my research. Took me a year, and then open my training. And as you can imagine, it wasn't as easy. You build it, they all come. Well, you build it, they don't come. Building it has many more different levels and meanings to it. Was fairly stressful first couple of years. It's a investment heavy business. Our equipment is kind of high and medical grade, very expensive. Lease is very expensive in downtown Toronto. And I'm just trying to figure out how to stay alive. And I got this client, one of our clients, Barnett Bain, our mutual friend. And he looked at me after a couple sessions and said, your problem is not the marketing, it's you, because he felt so much anxiety within me that you have to work on yourself. And then, kind of like attracts like, kind of the idea. And frankly, that's how I was introduced to mindfulness. And I opened my mind to it. And, in my opinion, I feel that during like a year or two of prioritizing mindfulness in my life, probably saved my business. Because that, when you make decisions, they're not just coming purely from the head, you being present to, the whole concept entirely, right? And that, in my search for being more present, more mindful, that's how I learned about Philip, and Philip told the rest of the story there.
Beautiful, beautiful. I like it. Philip, one attractive feature of this exercise method is that it can be effective with a time commitment of only 30 minutes per week. However, you and Andrei clarify in the book that if a person leads a sedentary lifestyle, then the method will not be effective because it's important to be physically active. So can you explain what you mean by being physically active? Because it seems to me that being active would also involve a time commitment.
Yeah, so it's absolutely true that with one workout of 30 minutes duration every week, you will get stronger and stronger and stronger. And I'm testament to that as are thousands of Andrei's clients. But that that doesn't mean you can spend the rest of the week on the couch watching football. The nature of the body, when you think of blood, you think of blood filling every capillary and vein and artery in the body, and that's not how it works. If all the capillaries in the body had blood in them, there would be no blood in any of the veins or arteries or the heart. There's the blood, when a muscle works, the blood goes because that's now where the oxygen is needed. So the other misunderstanding around this is that is that blood moves just by the pumping of the heart. Well, the action of the muscle helps to move the blood to where it's needed. So when blood is moved to a cell, it replenishes the cell and feeds it and nourishes it. If blood is not moved to the cell by the action of muscles, by the need for oxygen, the cell is not nourished, and a cell that is not nourished does not do well. And so walk to the grocery store, that's activity. You know, a round of golf. It's not climb a flight of stairs rather than, you know, the escalator. It's really simple. Our culture makes everything so convenient that you can lie on your couch and change channels and flip through your phone and not move. And so to be aware of that inveiglement into convenience and to choose to go for a walk, to move, to whatever it is. It doesn't need to be strenuous, but you are nourishing your cells every time you move.
Okay, so it's not really a time commitment. It's just living your ordinary life a little bit differently.
Yeah, nice way of putting it.
Okay. Andrei, the method
Yes,
that
yes.
you and Philip developed is called Mindful Strength Training to Failure, MSTF. What's meant by failure? It sounds odd to me to have failure as a desired outcome.
Well, you know, I've been doing this style of training and promoting what we do for about 10 years. And our client base are everyday people, you know, middle-aged, everyday people, right? Because, you know, once you get to your 40s, I don't know if you get it today or not, starts from early 30s birthday, but then it kind of picks up in the 40s, 50s, 60s birthday, when beginning to lose lean tissue, muscle, slowly. And the clients we specialize, because our style of training is so effective, so safe, are, you know, tend to be a bit older, right? Probably our average client will be around 60. You know, yes, I have 11-year-old and 15-year-old daughters. I train them, it's for every age. But the people who benefit the most are those ones who already have kind of been experiencing the loss of muscle and how it negatively affects their quality of life and well-being. So failure, it's not the best word to use, but, you know, we spend hours and days. Can we replace that word with something else? So anything, when in our context of strength training, the way our specific style, anything less that doesn't bring muscle to the full exhaustion, to the point when you move slowly to resistance and you get to the point where you're unable to complete that last repetition in a perfect form, it wouldn't describe it. So, you know, muscle exhaustion is not enough. What's muscle exhaustion? It's a spectrum. Failure is a clear term. You failed, you cannot go any longer.
Okay.
So that's what we mean. In our context of strength training, it's failure is your endpoint of the set. You go through the resistance properly and slowly until you get to the point of, you know, it's called technically in some scientific literature referred to it as momentary muscular failure, right? So you get to the point where momentarily at that point, time and space, muscle quote unquote fails, cannot generate enough force to continue. That's what we mean by failure in our workout.
Okay.
I might
And
add,
that's, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that, you know, the mindful strength training to failure. One of the principles is you're moving the weight very slowly, which makes it very safe because there's no sudden impact on the joints. And you just keep going until you can't, as Andrei said, you can't push against the resistance anymore and you involuntarily let the weight down. When a muscle goes to failure, evolution has prepared it to recognize the environment is presenting challenges that we're not strong enough to meet. And so the whole of the body rallies its resources to remodel that muscle to make it stronger for the next time. So going to failure is, in that specific sense, is what makes this workout so effective. Because some of your listeners may be familiar with the traditional workout where you lift a weight 10 times, 12 times, and then you rest for a few minutes, and then you do it again, and you're doing these sets. Well, if you take a muscle to failure, that's enough. The muscle has got the stimulus it needs to get stronger, and you can go on to the next exercise. So that's why in half an hour, you can effectively strengthen every major muscle in your body, because you're only spending 2 minutes on an exercise. Within 2 minutes is sort of the ideal window to go to reach failure. And so it's a very, very efficient form of workout, and it's very effective because of that stimulus that failure provides to remodel the muscle.
And as we go further into this conversation, I'll be giving you, both of you, another opportunity to explain why that muscle failure itself is giving you the benefit. So we will come back to that. Leave it hanging for a moment, leave everybody in suspense. Philip, I was reading in the book, the Deep Fitness book, that in our culture, we tend to neglect the muscles in the back of the body. What do we pay attention to instead? And what advantage would there be to paying more attention to our back?
Good question. Let's take the second part of that first. There's a difference between tone and tension. So a muscle that has tone will hold the structure of the body with ease. A muscle that has tension will compromise the structure of the body. So if I don't know if you can see me, if I turn sideways, the muscles that are holding my back keep me upright. Now the muscles between the shoulders, if they go slack and they lose their tone, I go like this. And that is how people in our culture become shaped bit by bit with age. That happens. The head goes forward, the back humps. So to reawaken those muscles, and it's a neurological issue, because what happens when a muscle isn't used, the brain is very economical, and it will diminish the neurological commitment to that muscle and put it somewhere else where it's needed. So the initial work of awakening the back is one of it's a neurological challenge, in the same way that a stroke victim, who's lost the use of their hand is struggles to pick up a pen. But that quality of concentrating on the muscle and feeling it enables the neurology to reawaken, and then the muscle can respond and get stronger. So that's the back issue. The other issue is, it's interesting to say, what do we pay attention to? I think it's more what takes over the body without our necessarily being aware of it. So our shoulders get tight, our necks get tight, we're all, our hips get tight, and we're not aware of that. And one of the things that happens for me during the workout is that, in the course of the workout, if there are any frustrations or stresses or tensions from the week, in the process of going to failure, I am washed clean of that. And at the end of the workout, it's it's almost the same feeling as I get at the end of a massage, except that my body is kind of trembling, but it's that same sense of bringing the body back to a state of peace that I achieve.
Okay. And there's something implied in your answer, and I just want to say I'm sure you will get back to this as we talk more. But in order to get to that feeling of peace, you've got to be fully present in the process. So we'll talk more about what being present is and how you get that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Andrei, we don't need very much jargon in this discussion. And in fact, in the book, there isn't a whole lot of jargon, but there are some words, and then the two of you explain what they mean. But there is a word we do need to know, and that is sarcopenia. Can you tell us what sarcopenia is?
Well, sarcopenia could be basically generally described as wasting of muscle with age. And there's different degrees of it. Some people are wasting it faster than others. But, starting from, for sure in your 50s, unless you proactively doing something about maintaining your muscle strength, everybody will, to some degree, there's no exception, will be subject to degree of sarcopenia.
Okay.
Philip, do you feel like say a little bit more about, because Philip read a little bit more research in the origins of the word? And
yeah, I'd love to. The thing about sarcopenia is there is, as Andrei said, there's an inevitability to it unless you take countermeasures. Now, sarcopenia, you may not realize it's happening. You might weigh the same at the age of 60 that you did when you were 20, but the likelihood is that the proportion of muscle to fat has shifted in the direction of fat. And why is muscle important? For years, they thought that muscle had just one primary function, which was to move us around. And then in the early 2000s, they discovered that muscle it's like a hormone factory, that muscle creates these messenger molecules that are called myokines, and myokines go through the whole body and affect every cell, every tissue, every organ in the body to promote health, to rejuvenate. So for years, they were wondering, why does exercise have a global effect on our health? And they discovered myokines, and they had the answer. So muscle has two primary functions. It is, yes, it moves us around, but it is the bedrock of our metabolic health. And the stronger a muscle is, and the more intensely it works, the more myokines are created. And so once you understand that role of muscle, then you can understand that sarcopenia isn't just an inconvenience that means you can't walk as fast. Sarcopenia is associated with every single chronic disease of aging. Every single chronic disease of aging is correlated with sarcopenia. So to understand that A, in half an hour, once a week, you can get stronger, and B, by doing so, you are doing so much more for your health than just making your muscles stronger. So, sarcopenia is like the shadow in our culture that drags us into the frailty and chronic diseases of old age.
Okay, and sarcopenia is loss of muscle.
With aging, yes.
Okay. Now, before we go further, I'm going to point out that in your book, you caution that anyone who's interested in embarking on exercise training should discuss their health and the training with a medical practitioner first. So the audience today should keep that in mind for what you're hearing today as well. So now I'm going to direct my questions just not directly at Philip or at Andrei, but either of you can pick up on this or you can add for each other. So can you give us an introduction to the concept of embodiment?
Well, I might take a crack at that. This is something that is so outside of our cultural understanding that I'd like to give it a little context. Disembodiment is a sort of exit from the sensations of the present, the sensations of the body, into the abstract thinking of the head. And we give so much allegiance to the head and have considered the body so secondary that it's conceived as the vehicle that moves the head around. And to give you a sense of this, that goes back to Plato. I mean, 350 BC, in the dialogue Timaeus, this very wise man Timaeus is asked, how did the gods fashion us? And Timaeus answers, oh, well, first, they started by fashioning this divine sphere based on the orbs of the heavens. And then they realized this sphere wouldn't be able to get around, so they grew it a vehicle, arms and legs and a trunk. So disembodiment is not a recent thing. It has been built into our culture such that it's ingrained in our language. I mean, you know, two heads are better than one. We don't say two hearts are better than one, because the head should be in charge. The leader of every organization is the head of that organization. You know, you do a head count and you know how many people are present. You do a body count, well, that's a very different matter. And you know, it goes on and on and on, how our allegiances to the head and the body is derided. So to understand disembodiment is also to understand that embodiment is not a matter of sitting in the head, listening to the body. For me, embodiment is about listening to the world through the body. And I feel the body like a resonator, like a singing bowl. And literally the body attunes to the present, attunes to its fluctuations in a way that lies so far beyond the conscious awareness that we could bring to it, that you're not going to capture in any objective way what the body is picking up on, but you can feel it. And so this understanding of embodiment for me is to recognize, sort of in a, I don't know if your readers may be familiar with Ian McGilchrist and The Master and His Emissary, a book that looks in detail at the differences between right hemisphere and left hemisphere. But as a culture, as we've become disembodied, we have become preponderantly left hemisphere biased. And the left hemisphere is what pulls things to pieces and analyzes and gains perspective. And it's an invaluable resource, but it cannot feel wholeness. And the right hemisphere attunes to wholeness and brings things into relationship and is the hemisphere that is most deeply associated with the body. And so right hemisphere thinking is thinking in a holistic way. And when I'm asked to define embodiment, I say embodiment is a state in which the whole of your intelligence comes into coherence with the present. And we have been trained to believe that we can think more clearly with a fragment of our intelligence than we can with the whole of our being. And I think we do ourselves a grave injustice in that belief.
Andrei, did you want to add something?
Well, when it comes to embodiment, I would rather say no more.
Okay.
When it comes to didn't feel his presence.
Okay. So there's a lot more to
Uh,
it.
Yeah. So, okay. So maybe I'll say something. Philip has been doing this for, I don't know, probably close to 50 years or more, right? Dedicating his entire life to understanding embodiment and kind of just developing clarity around it. For somebody like us who are fairly new to it, and it's fairly not that hard to experience embodiment during the workout when you move through resistance very slowly, because it allows you, if you have the right kind of cueing, allows you to kind of get a good taste of how it feels, because it's not that hard to feel the muscles as they're getting more and more tired, right? The lactic acid is beginning to build up and you feel the energies, and you just kind of get to the state where the experience of the moment by moment, becomes your main objective rather than kind of the final destination. And then whatever shows up, you simply open yourself, intimately open yourself to those experiences. Don't manage it. Don't try to be anything else. And you see kind of what happens. You just kind of, the muscles are shaking and the body is shaking, feeling, but at the same time, there's kind of a little bit smile on your face, because you're so present in the moment that you're not so much in the head anymore. You kind of, the supervisor in the head that keep us separate, from the world, takes a break, and it feels very freeing and liberating to be in that state. So, from my perspective, that's my application of Philip's work for the most part.
So you're in the present and you're not trying to control your experience. You're just experiencing your experience from inside.
Nice way of putting it. Yeah.
Okay. The mindful strength training method has 3 aspects: strength training, mindfulness, and going to failure. We've already touched on the topic of failure. Can you introduce us to the concept of strength training?
Well, strength training is also, particularly in scientific literature, is commonly referred as resistance training. Sometimes people would call it in the gym weightlifting, but they're all applications of basically strength training. To me, what strength training is a stimulation of the muscles around your body on regular basis in order to achieve immediate, short, mid, and long-term positive adaptations and benefits. Difference between strength training and other types of exercise. In strength training, you would typically engage, full of your body. You won't just work in your legs or upper body. You exercise in minimally all the major muscles in the body. And going back to the subject of how we lose muscle starting from as soon as 30th birthday, there's really no other way to effectively to hold on to your muscles other than to doing safe and effective way of strength training. So as far as we're concerned, everybody over age of late 30s, early 40s should consider, and we have clients who are 93 still coming, but the sooner you start, the better off you are, should consider the right application of strength training as the foundation of the exercise. Not necessarily because they love it per se, to me it's irrelevant. You're doing it because it allows you to be better in everything else that you do in your life that you actually love. There's no aspect in your life that somehow wouldn't have a positive effect as a consequence of you regularly participating in a form of strength training.
I might add to that, if I may. For me, one of the big advantages of strength training over other forms of exercise is illuminated by the understanding that every muscle has 3 different kinds of fiber that constitute it. And there's the endurance fibers that can sort of go and go and go and not tire. They haven't got a lot of power, but they've got endurance. And then there are intermediate fibers that have a little more power but less endurance and don't recover as quickly. And then there are the largest muscles in the body, the fast twitch muscles, the powerhouse muscles. And these are the muscles that we rely on in an emergency. So these muscles store a form of glucose within the muscle so that when we need that burst of energy, we're not having to release fatty acids and convert them into energy. The energy is there to go. Now, there is a very strict sequence of enlistment for these muscles. The endurance muscles are enlisted first. When they reach their limit, the intermediate muscles are enlisted, and only when they reach their limit are the powerhouse muscles enlisted. So in strength training, you go through all three different types of muscle fiber, and the largest muscles in your body are going to failure, especially with MSTF. You can walk 5 miles a day every day and still be suffering from sarcopenia because you're never engaging those powerhouse muscles. So there are many forms of cardio that do not keep sarcopenia at bay. For example, yoga does very little to keep those large muscles activated and strong. And strength training is the most direct way of achieving that.
So we would use the powerhouse in ordinary living. We would use the powerhouse muscles if we had to run into a building and get somebody out of a fire.
Exactly.
But otherwise, we wouldn't normally recruit them.
Yeah.
Yes. Another example, sleeping on an ice and catching yourself. That's fast twitch, that of activation, that also fast twitch fiber. The more fast twitch fibers we have, because they're structurally larger, that means they have more cushion. If you end up falling down, you have less chances of hurting yourself. And we know after a certain age, falling down leads to quite profound consequences. Many people don't never recover from it. So it's quite important to systematically activate and stimulate those muscles, specific type of muscle fiber.
Okay. Are there any misconceptions about fitness that we should be aware of?
Well, I'm aware of a few of them. Our legacy in terms of our understanding of fitness traces back to an American doctor, Kenneth Cooper, who was very highly regarded. He trained NASA astronauts. He was, working with the President's Council on fitness. And in 1968, he published a book called Aerobics. And until that book arrived, there was no such word as aerobics. He invented it. And it was a phenomenally influential book. His book sold 30 million copies, and it started the jogging craze. And there are 4 foundational assertions in aerobics. One of them is that the main purpose of exercise is to strengthen the heart and lungs. The second is that, therefore, cardio is the most important form of exercise. The third assertion is the more cardio you do, the better. And Kenneth Cooper devised a point system where, walking 2 miles, you get this many points. Swimming this far, you get this many points. And the more points you accumulate in a week, the healthier you'll be. And the last assertion was that strength training he advised against, because the more muscle you have, the more strain you put on the cardiovascular system to sustain them. Every single one of those assertions has been overturned by research and science. So, to say that the purpose of exercise is to strengthen the heart and lungs, there was this brilliant study that was done where they had cyclists working out on ergometers on stationary bikes, and they were trying to study the increase in your ability to metabolize oxygen. And so they measured it at the beginning, and they measured it after the 4-week training session period was over. But the cyclists were only using one leg. And so, they measured your VO2 max, your ability to metabolize oxygen, with the leg that had been trained. And I think my memory is it was something like 23% improved. Then they measured it with the leg that hadn't been trained, and there was no improvement. So there was an adaptation, but the adaptation was not in the heart and the lungs, or it would have shown up in the other leg. The adaptation was in the muscle itself. And so then to say that cardio is the most important exercise, is to fall prey to that belief that what you're doing is you're primarily strengthening the heart and lungs. And as for the more you do, the better. Kenneth Cooper, he saw elite athletes dropping dead or getting gravely ill. James Fix, who wrote the book on running, I think he was 42 when he dropped dead. Well, by Kenneth Cooper's calculations, the man should have lived into his 90s. And then there were these, marathon runners. And so Kenneth Cooper belatedly understood that the body needs to recover. And when you take a muscle to failure, you are doing damage to it that promotes a strengthening. And that strengthening, that remodeling of the muscle takes 2 to 3 days. And so that's one reason, in MSTF, you only train once a week or maybe twice a week, because the body needs to recover. So all of those primary assertions that we still live by have been overturned. And that's one of the things that, when we wrote Deep Fitness, we wanted to sort of bring people up to date on the science as a way of saying, the most important form of exercise is one that builds that foundation of your health, which is the skeletal muscle system.
Okay. So we talked a bit about failure. We've talked about strength training. We've talked about high intensity strength training versus aerobics. Can you introduce us now to the concept of mindfulness?
Well, I'd be delighted to take a first crack at that. We are used to riding atop the body the way someone might ride a donkey, and we make the body go harder for its own good. And that is our relationship to the body in this culture. And so you push it, and it's a willful assertion telling the body what to do and how to do it. And when we talk about a mindful approach, the mindful approach is facilitated by the very, very slow movements of the workout. But it's also an opportunity to drop out of the head and into the body. And when you do, instead of the workout being willful, it is an expression of pure intention. So to be fully present to what is happening, and my sense as I'm doing the workout is that the breath, the out breath is moving the weight, and the out breath starts deep in the pelvic bowl, and that river of the breath is what is moving the weight. And what that mindful presence does is it takes the charge off the stories that we tell ourselves. And in the middle of a workout, you're stressed, the adrenaline is pumping, and it's so easy to say, oh, I don't think I can do any more, or I'm at the end, and the story takes over, and you stop before you've actually experienced failure. When you drop into the body and you allow the body to go, you are you are outside the realm of storytelling and you are just present to it. And as I approach failure, my awareness becomes more and more subtle, so that I can't do a gross movement anymore, but I can do a little pumping, and that and the juice, the maximum benefit of the workout is really in the last, I don't know, Andrei, 10 seconds, 15 seconds maybe. And so to be in the body is to enable yourself to actually go to true failure rather than the narrative of failure.
Andrei, did you want to add anything?
No, I think Philip did a good job differentiating between the experience, the mindset that one can take, which makes profound differences. Just 2-3 weeks ago, we ran a workshop, deep fitness workshop at Embodiment training, where Philip led a group of some of our clients, some people did for the first time, and there are several our clients who are doing exercises because I train them. I know what they normally do during their workouts. They were doubling, tripling their time and retention, the duration of exercise using this approach versus, just no approach at all, just see what I can do, right? It makes profound difference on the experience itself, but arguably also long-term effect and results of the workout.
Okay. One key feature of your exercise method is the importance of intensity. In order for us to understand why, could you continue explaining, you started already, but could you continue to explain how the muscles work? I think we need to get a little bit into the physiology.
Okay, Philip, maybe I'll jump it because Philip already just, a few minutes before explained how the muscle fibers are recruited sequentially. It's called sequential muscle fiber recruitment. So basically, as he mentioned, there are 3 types of muscle fibers. The lower order fibers responsible for endurance type of activity, they recover very fast, something like 90 seconds. That's why we can run marathons. Then we have higher order fibers, and only after those lower order fibers are kind of exhausted, then the brain will start recruiting sequentially the higher order fibers, as Philip mentioned, so-called intermediate twitch. And only then, once those 2 types of muscle fibers are fully exhausted, which you would achieve with our style of training, you get to the fast twitch fibers, the powerhouse fibers, which we also described. And as we mentioned, the job of those fast twitch fibers is all-out emergency effort. So unless you generate that spike of adrenaline, which essentially activates our sympathetic nervous system, signaling our body, this is an emergency, pay attention, right? Because that's what the adrenaline does. The higher the intensity of the muscular work, the exponentially more adrenaline the body will release, and the function of it essentially to make you present so you can pay attention right now. There's no time to think about your past and future, work, anything else. You'll be very present. So when we train people, I can feel when somebody transitions into that state, because that's that kind of state of real presence, like everything goes away and you kind of enter in this soda straw laser view. You're so present because you activated that survival, fight and flight response. And then I know you're going to be using fast twitch fibers. Anything stopping short of it, I'm not so sure how much fast twitch fibers that we need to stimulate will be activated. But I do know once you get to the state of emergency, we do that. And so that's another reason why the intensity is important, because if it's not there, you are definitely going to get some benefits and maybe lots of benefits of exercise, but you won't necessarily get the kind of benefits that intensity brings by releasing the adrenaline. And when we release adrenaline, there are so many different adaptations happen that the body otherwise never goes to. So you can summarize it that the benefits of this style of training are sort of greater than the sum of all parts.
Okay. Can either of you say a bit more about myokines? And actually, let me take you on to the second part of the question. As intensity increases, adrenaline is released. And what are the positive effects of adrenaline? What happens?
There was one study that was done, you know, in an emergency, someone's pinned beneath the car, and someone with the adrenaline can actually lift the car in a way that they simply couldn't without the emergency. So it was understood that adrenaline has this momentary effect of increasing strength. But what they found was that when adrenaline is present, when work is being done, the strengthening of the muscle lasts. So a muscle that's worked not in the presence of muscle, in the presence of adrenaline, will get stronger. In the presence of adrenaline, it will get significantly stronger. So it was a switch from understanding adrenaline as a sort of momentary survival benefit that could make us stronger, to understand that actually the strengthening effect of adrenaline lasts. It stays with us in the remodeling of the muscle.
Okay. I'm going to try and take a little bit of a crack at this myself based on what you write in the book. And that is that with this extreme intensity in the powerhouse muscles, they release the adrenaline. The adrenaline activates the myokines, which are the hormone that goes through the whole body, and its function is to reduce inflammation and engage in cell repair. If there's some damage in a cell somewhere, it engages in cell repair. And there's a couple of proteins. One of them it's called CRTC2. And there's also the release of fatty acids when adrenaline is activated, and the fatty acids go through the blood and they come back to the muscles and feed the muscles. So you're burning off some of those fatty acids, and they are being used to feed the muscles. Also, when you're doing this intense level of training, there's, as you said, there's glucose stored in the muscles for emergency use. That gets used, gets released. And as a result, you have an increase in insulin sensitivity. So these are various benefits.
Yeah.
Now, part of this cycle of what happens with this at the cell level is that you have some cells that are in normal living, they're in charge of reproducing. Cells reproduce, and then there's another whole set of cells that will inhibit the function of those cells if we get into like a famine situation or somewhere else where we just have to survive. We're not trying to grow and be healthier, we're just trying to make it through the day. So they will inhibit the reproduction function of the cells and inhibit them. But when adrenaline is released, the inhibitory function is muted so that the reproduction continues on. And sometimes it can get co-opted by another group of cells that have the function of repairing cells. So you can sometimes have reproduction of cells. You can also have repair of cells. So the long and short of it is that when you activate these powerhouse muscles, you're activating a circuit that rebuilds the cells in the muscles. So that if you take the time after your intense training to let the cells recover, let the muscles recover, what's happening in that recovery process is that the cells that develop, that build the muscles are being repaired and strengthened. And that's that's a long-lasting effect. It doesn't just disappear after a day or two. And that's why your argument is that the high-intensity strength training, if you maintain it, say, once a week regularly, and you give yourself a chance to recover, that you will inevitably get stronger from session to session after an initial adaptation period. And if you do that, now I've lost my last train of thought, but that's my understanding about the underlying physiology under these things that you're explaining to us.
Yeah, and what you're sort of moving into is that concept of hormesis, and excuse me, hormesis, is this survival mechanism that all life on Earth has, that in times of stress, the impulse to grow is diminished and it goes into repair mode. So the benefit of stress, and there are three main kinds of stress. One is fasting, another is extreme heat or cold, and the third is intense exercise. And so intense exercise has a benefit not just on the cells of the muscle, but on the cells through the whole body. So there are two main qualities. One is that damaged cells are recycled through autophagy. The bits of the cells are recirculated, and the proteins are put back into use as a recycling function. The other is that cells should have a timely death, and that doesn't always happen. And there's apoptosis is the name, where the apoptosis is initiated, and those cells, rather than keep continuing to grow and grow and grow, are taken out of circulation, basically. And so the effect of this stress that the body is put under is one of rejuvenation, and its effect on longevity has been really well documented, how it contributes to longevity.
I was going to say, as a segue to what you just said, in your book, you define hormesis as the metabolic shock that's provided by a stressor, such as the experience of feeling a muscle momentarily fail, despite your best efforts to keep going. And in your book, you state that hormesis is the key to a little miracle. Remember saying that? What's the miracle?
Andrei, do you want to carry that one?
Well, so basically what I think what we're talking, what Philip just described is that when we have an acute application of stress, we activate, we're in a state of hormesis. And that stressor will activate certain kind of longevity pathways related to health and longevity pathways. So we can say that when there's abundance of resources, for example, certain physiological pathways will be active, it's time to reproduce and grow. When there is a shortage of resources, so there's a stressor, the other sets of genes are going to get activated, and completely different physiological signals in the body will take place. It's that it's a balance in the two states. You don't want to be, and it's unhealthy to be predominantly in one of the only growth or only, stressor, right? Because if you stress all the time, you fast exercise, you're gonna die, you're gonna perish. Similarly, if you're always an anabolic, you always grow, cancer cell grows, and you're also gonna die at a young age. So it's about that balance. There's this book been published a few years, not that long ago, maybe 3-4 years ago now, by David Sinclair from Harvard on the subject of longevity. And so kind of Philip touched on it a little bit, is that So what happens is that there's kind of three main physiological pathways, according to David Sinclair, that are at the upstream of longevity, as the scientists know today, at least according to his interpretation. They're called AMPK, sirtuin genes, and mTOR. So AMPK is something that there is a stress or there is a shortage of resources that will stimulate and trigger that kind of DNA repair mode and in a hunkering down mode, where it's not time to grow, it's time to not reduce the cell division, it's kind of time to lay low until things get better, which is good for our longevity. There is these sirtuin genes that are involved in DNA repair. What sirtuin genes are needed, there's another metabolic metabolite is called essentially NAD. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, it's a long scientific term. But what happens, this NAD is inside of every of our cells, and it's responsible for over 500 different metabolic pathways. And if you don't have NAD in our cells, basically we die. And what the latest research shows that the level of NAD in our cells goes down as we get older. Like a 50-year-old typically will have half the level of NAD of 20-year-old, 20-year-old, half the level of NAD of, younger person. So they go down. When we generate that acute stress, exercise being one of them, fasting another, the NADs go up. When NADs go up, the sirtuin genes get activated and go to work doing all the repair in our cells, right? So what that miracle is, I think, Philip, is what we're talking about, is that when we exercise intensely, strength training to failure is one of them, basically any type of exercise when you're losing your breath will raise your level of NADs, more or less, to my understanding. And that promotes those signaling for DNA repair and longevity. And then there's a time when it's a time to build new cells, repair cells, new cells. So there's a concept is called muscle protein turnover. So during the workout, you're gonna break down some of the older muscle protein. They don't work very well in autophagy. And then post-workout, and that will activate that AMPK, sirtuins, doing all those things. Post-workout, you're gonna have a meal that has proteins which are composed of, mainly you need to have protein that has enough of so-called essential amino acids. There's 9 of them. And when you have enough of those amino acids in the right formulation, typically any quality protein coming from animal will give it to you. Then you deliver your body those amino acids that will allow your body to build new muscle cells, to replenish in the place of the old ones. So session by session, what's happening is you are getting rid of the old, not very well functioning cells and replacing them with the new. And it accumulates over time. That's how you get stronger and stronger and stronger, because your muscle quality gets better and better and better. So there's all these different processes that take place. But in terms of miracle, I think, going back to it, is that it's good for you to go through a stressor, basically, just from the DNA repair longevity point of view. But again, you don't want to be there all the time. It's that balance. You need that, but you also need time to give your body the substrate for the new muscle protein, and to grow as well. And if you maintain the good balance between the two, the right balance, it's all about.
And the little miracle is that your biological age can be reversed. So there's your chronological age, and then there's your biological age, and they're not necessarily the same. And you can actually, the rejuvenating effects of strength training to failure can reverse your biological age. And
the proof is in the pudding. Look at Philip, how old are you?
I'm 103 and you never...
He's look like 35 and he's 70, but I'm kind of used to being to this latest research of longevity, so I would send my blood work for those, measure my biological age. And every time in my experience when it came back, I'm like 7-8 years younger biologically, in my personal experience. according to those latest tools that we have to measure our biological age.
It does not lead to immortality, but it can delay the aging.
It's allows you, we're all gonna die, but sort of, if you don't do anything, you know what goes. You're going down the scale and you know what happens, the frailty where it leads. It's all around us. So what happens when you do proper application of strength training, you kind of reverse it and your quality of life changes, your well-being, your health span, even arguably longevity as well. So we're all gonna die, but you're gonna die faster. So you have way more quality years ahead of you than otherwise. So basically, that's it.
Okay, that's the miracle. Okay. You steer your readers away from having weight loss as a goal. Can you say more about this?
Well, I could take a crack at it and Andrei could fill in.
Yeah, go ahead.
When your goal is weight loss, your concern is what number shows up on the scale. And the lower the number gets, the more successful you are. But it doesn't distinguish between loss of fat and loss of muscle. And so you can be losing muscle at a precipitous rate. And as far as your diet is concerned, as far as your weight loss regime is concerned, you are successful. And meanwhile, you are undermining your metabolic health as your muscle is wasting.
Okay. You state.
So the idea, can I say a little bit more? So the idea when we want to talk about weight loss and what we really want to talk about fat loss, and there is very specific ways by which we can achieve it, where we can still activate the longevity pathways, we can still target only fat, we can still maintain muscle, but it's that combination of exercise and nutrition that it has to be done in a very specific way. If you're just focusing on simply caloric reduction, but it doesn't matter which form, intermittent fasting or just eating less, if you don't take proper care, if you don't understand that aspect of, if you don't respect the muscle in the process, so what's going to happen on average, based on research, 25-30% of lean tissue will come from the muscle. There was latest, like one of the latest study came across a couple of weeks ago. They look at people who they put them on intermittent fasting, 2 meals a day, and then measure their body composition. They lost 65% of total weight came from lean tissue, 65%. So it's a big deal. And the more we participate in that traditional weight loss approach, as Philip mentioned, the more we kind of ruining our metabolic health long term. And in the end, we're all gonna start eating, and the weight is gonna come back, whether you want it or not, just a matter of time. What's going to happen, most of it is going to come back as fat. And now you're even in the worse shape than you were before. So when it comes to weight loss, it has to be done the right way and should be called fat loss. And the muscle should be priority in that process.
So I can offer a personal testament. Andrei organized a 6-week study, and the purpose of the study was to see if you could lose fat and gain muscle at the same time, or at least not lose muscle. And at the end of the 6 weeks, the scale told me that I had lost 6 pounds, which isn't that much. But they did a body scan before and after the 6-week study. I'd lost 12 pounds of fat and gained 6 pounds of muscle. So it can be done, but as Andrei says, it just has to be done in the right way.
Okay. You state that MSTF changes the body in 4 ways that promote a reduction of fatty tissue. Can you expand on this? Can you say a little bit about what the 4 ways are?
Well, I can do the Philip if you want. I actually opened the book. I think I remember the 4 ways because I was flipping through the book today and I just
okay, good.
So it will increase your basal metabolic rate. as muscle, particularly the fast twitch fiber, because they're structurally the largest of all the three types. It means they require more energy to be maintained at rest. So your basal metabolic rate is going to go up fairly significantly in a short term, within like 3 days post-workout, but as well as in the long term. And just if you do the calculation, let's say you lost some muscle tissue. So your basal metabolic rate, will come down. Let's say over 10 years, now you're burning a couple hundred calories a day less. I'm just making the kind of estimation. Well, if you do the math, 200 calories burned less a day translates to 20 pounds of fat over the course of a year. So that's how important your basal metabolic rate is. And that's why when you look at the weight loss, you should talk about fat loss, not weight loss. So you want to maintain that tissue because that's your metabolism, muscle tissue. The other one is, as we described, there will be a process of muscle fiber remodeling, the process of muscle protein turnover, where we essentially breaking down the old muscle protein, replacing them with the new ones, and the new ones, they function better. And then session by session, your muscle quality improves, so on and so forth. We're emptying the glycogen storage, and you mentioned that, Kathleen, as you mentioned about adrenaline. So it happens, the higher the intensity of the workout, the exponentially more adrenaline will be released. And there is a concept, it's called glycogen amplification cascade effect, meaning one molecule of adrenaline, one molecule of adrenaline will deplete like one molecule of glycogen. Each of those molecules of glycogen will deplete thousands other molecules of glycogen. One of those another thousand. So it's exponential relationship. The more they intensely we work the muscle, essentially they exponentially move it, depleting that glycogen out of the muscle cell, which what translates in the short term, but also in the long term, when you consume your carbohydrates, we all do in our daily living, rather than being stored as fat because your muscle cell is full of glycogen, it's going to go to your muscle. It's going to replenish the storage, right? So it helps you with just that kind of, nutrient sensitivity of your muscle cells, to the glycogen in particular. And, when we talk about the adrenaline, when we spike adrenaline, not only more glycogen is being depleted, but also body will release, free fatty acids out of its storage from the adipose tissue, from the fat cells, that also will be used for energy. So those are the two main ways by which it helps you to maintain healthy body composition.
You have advice about what to eat after a resistance training session?
Oh, I do. And unfortunately, most people don't take it too seriously. When it comes to exercise, it's fairly straightforward, particularly when you come to a place like you go to an expert in element training, you go to somebody else, you kind of in their hands, right? They tell you what to do, you do it, you go home, 30 minutes, 1 hour, you go home. They don't have to think about it again. When it comes to nutrition, it's 24/7, it's personal, very, very personal, very emotional. But when it comes to the best effect of my kind of muscle-centric approach for your lifestyle, well-being, longevity, exercise, you can look at it essentially as a primer. But you still need to deliver the substrate, those so-called essential amino acids that come from protein, to synthesize new muscle tissue, synthesize new muscle proteins. So the best way to get the best results is do your workout and then have a protein. Now, there's a little bit more science to like what kind of protein. Well, you can get protein from food. It's called complete protein. As long as it has enough of those essential amino acids that will do the job. But the research shows the faster we get those amino acids from protein into the blood, the better response we're going to get in terms of synthesizing new muscle protein. So after the workout, you want to get those proteins in your muscle as fast as you can. So something like whey protein isolate, from a good quality source, probably one of the best ways post-workout. Basically, you work out, wait 15, 20 minutes for your body to come down, get all the blood returned to your stomach because it's still probably in your muscle, during the workout. Wait 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, and then, have a protein shake. And then wait another hour or two, and then you can have a complete meal. And the signaling in terms of synthesizing new muscle tissue are upregulated for up to 48, between 24 to 48 hours after the workout. What that means is my general recommendation to everyone is when you do strength training, next 24, 48 hours is the best time to build some new muscle tissue because all the signals are there. The body is waiting, but you have to deliver the substrate. If you're not going to deliver the substrate, there's no bricks to build a wall, right? With the workers at the side, but they're sitting, not doing anything because there is no bricks. So the bricks are your amino acids are the protein. So yeah, emphasizing protein, particularly after the workout, is for the most optimal results, will make a big difference.
Now, I was planning to ask you if you wanted to say anything more about the concept of failure. Are we done with that, or did you want to say a bit more about failure?
I might say a little more about it. The workout and that process of going to failure is such a deep encounter with the self for me. I am at the very cusp, the very edge of my abilities. And is it really failure? Can I go a little further? It is a profoundly animating experience. And, take it or leave it, but for me, every workout is a spiritual practice. And what I mean by that is I am so alive, so present, so aware of the energy passing through me. And it's that quality of going to failure that is the trigger for that. It's the test. It's like the litmus paper that exposes it for me. So it's a rich, wonderfully alive experience if you are not in a state of division. But if you're sitting in your head, pushing your body, it will be an experience of suffering.
Right. You have to be present.
Yeah.
Okay. And mindfulness, is there anything more about integrating mindfulness into strength training, or do you think we've covered that one now?
I would just say that we confuse the words mind and brain. Because we are so head-centric, we speak of the mind as though it were the brain. And to me, the brain is the organ that sits in the cranium. Mind suffuses my entire being. There is no cell in my body that doesn't participate in its thinking. So to understand mindfulness as a whole body experience rather than an activity of the cranium is really important.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say the word breath somewhere in here. You recommend breathing from the belly or the abdomen rather than from the upper chest. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to give us a quick tutorial on how to do that.
Oh, I'd be very happy to. Let's start with this. Let's start. Anyone who's willing to. Our culture tends to breathe with the chest, so I would invite people to feel the sternum, feel the breastbone, and let that do the work of breathing to see how it feels. So just go like that and see how it feels. And my hunch is it will feel panicky, anxious inducing, tight. If you can let go of the controlling of the breath that happens in the chest and let that go soft and quiet and allow your awareness to go to the belly. And, for those who are able to, if you can feel the pelvic floor, And the reason I say that is the pelvic floor is a diaphragm. Physiologically, it is a diaphragm in the body. And what happens in our culture is the pelvic floor gets locked up and the thoracic diaphragm is pumping against it. And when they work together, every breath is a massage through all the viscera. And the more deeply you can release the body to the breath, the more you draw the body into its natural center and its natural source of strength. And so to bring the awareness to the belly, and what I'd invite people to do is to imagine there is a balloon in the pelvic bowl. And that balloon, doesn't come above the belly button, and it fills the pelvic bowl. And that is where the breath happens. And as gently as possible, see if you can feel all the breath gently filling that balloon. And you feel the balloon expanding deep, deep within your being. And then on the out-breath, that balloon gently releases, so that the whole of your breathing is centered on that release of the pelvic bowl to the in-breath and the release of the pelvic bowl to the out-breath. And you may even imagine the breath entering the body the way you would pour water into a jug, where the water falls down through the jug, and in the body it hits the pelvic floor like the bottom of the jug and fills the pelvic bowl from the bottom up. It's a very different experience to feel the breath filling the pelvic bowl from the bottom up rather than being pushed from the top down. And we're in such a top-down culture. We've turned breathing into a top-down operation where oh yes, it's important to breathe deeply, so we push the breath as far down into the body as we can. But that's a willful thing, and it takes muscular effort. And that's not the way a baby breathes. A baby releases its body to the in-breath and releases its body to the out-breath. And if you can find that release for yourself deep in the pelvic bowl, feel that balloon gently expand with the in-breath and gently release with the out-breath, your breath will bring you in touch with your center and your true source of power. And to allow it to be subtle and to allow it to be gentle. And the more gently you allow yourself to feel it, the more clearly you will feel it. I really trust the gentleness of it.
I'd like to bring us to a close by inviting each of you to share a bit of your life story, specifically as to how high impact, high intensity strength training has affected your lives, your personal accounts. Perhaps, Philip, you could go first.
I'd be delighted, because I teach workshops around the world and travel, and physical fitness has always been important to me, sometimes more haphazardly than at other times. But when I got that email from Andrei, with all the travel and everything else, I could feel my fitness on a downward trend. And he caught me, and it has been a godsend to my life. It was 6 years ago that I received that email. And from that day, I've been getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And, I've been doing the workout for 6 years. I'm 70 years old, and I am still getting stronger. I can see my times on the chart or I'm lasting longer. I'm having to increase the weights. And it's an incremental increase, but my gosh, 30 years ago, my hope when I turned 70 would have been, I hope I'm not getting weak too fast. And instead, here I am getting stronger and feeling the vitality of that. I'm just profoundly grateful to Andrei for having introduced me to that workout on that first day.
And Andrei, would you like to?
Yeah. From my perspective, you mentioned something high impact. It's actually the opposite. It's low impact because of the slow movement. Little correction. It's a low impact kind of exercise. Simply just in physics, forces, mass time acceleration, reduce acceleration, you reduce the impact on the joints. So it's a low impact form of exercise. For my personal experience, just personally, when I opened New Element training, I was fairly strong. I worked out, using this approach for about a year or two before I opened New Element training. Prior to that, I worked out conventionally, multiple sets and what other people are doing in the gym. So it wasn't that weak. And just the longevity of this style of training, it's a miracle because you're working as intensely as we described, but at the same time, there's no injuries. Workout only takes 30 minutes once or twice a week. So I'm growing stronger, same as Philip. I'm way, way stronger when I was 10 years younger. And I was already fairly strong, no injuries, right? No health issues whatsoever. So most of our clients experience the same thing. People get into their 60s and so on, telling, most of their friends taking a handful of pills for this. And our clients who've been doing it for several years don't take any pills. They don't need them. They go to the doctor tells them, okay, go home, you're perfect, there's nothing wrong with you. So for me, it's the personal transformation. As I'm still amazed how I'm getting stronger. There's no way, if I didn't discover this style of training, I would do it this consistently for 10 years. It just wouldn't happen. So the real results happen. Yes, there's immediate benefits of the workout, but the real results, real benefits are long-term. So you want to find a solution that works in the long term, not in the short term, because if you don't stimulate the muscle on a regular basis, you're gonna waste the muscle. So this approach that we described, to me, the miracle is how sustainable it is in the long term. I'm not sure what else I wanted to say, but that's my personal.
That's excellent. Thank you. I'm going to moderate the questions. I see that there have been some that come in, but I'd like to pause first, take this a little bit out of my planned order. And I want to pause for a moment to say to Philip and Andrei to thank you so much for doing this with us today for Mensa. We have a very high attendance today, and I think that this interview, you've had so much to say, and it's been so beneficial, and I just really appreciate it very much. So on behalf of Toronto Mensa, thank you, Philip, and thank you, Andrei, for this.
Well, thank you, Kathleen, for the invitation. It is, I think I speak for both of us, it's such a pleasure to share this work with your group and what it's meant to us. And, we both feel everyone should know about muscle and the importance of healthy muscle in your metabolic health.
As a sign of our appreciation, we will be sending you a small gift, just so you don't get a surprise. Okay, I'm now going to open up the Q&A box and see what I find there. I had started at the beginning by asking people to say where they are signing in from. So we have Toronto, Frida from Ottawa, Jeanette, Mississauga, Rani from Switzerland. Hi, Rani. Gilles from Montreal, Robert Burton from Toronto, Morna from Edmonton, Danny from Montreal, Laura from Mississauga, Gary and Kathy in Mississauga, Jennifer Nichols in Montreal, Joanne Toronto, Steve Mississauga, Douglas Brown Newcastle, Gunag, I keep saying that, Gonzalo Bunag from Quezon City in the Philippines, who got up at a ridiculous hour, I think, to watch. Giovanni Pepe from Barrie, Jim Barney, Toronto, Mark McWilliam in the Greater Toronto Area, Michael Liebscher from Oshawa, Susan Joyle Coleman from Virgin, Utah, Zion, Mark Frickle, Scarborough, Ron Wild, Toronto, D. Miller, Calgary, Jill. Here we come to a comment or a question. Okay. About recovery time, how do I know I have left enough time to recover?
You could simply, because there's so many different variables, depend on the level of intensity, behavior conditions, and many other variables. But think of it this way: if this is your base level of energy, after this kind of workout, you kind of in the whole energy level. So your sympathetic nervous system is overstimulated. You created all the micro tear to your muscle fibers, so there's inflammation, goes up acutely, and so on. It takes about a couple of days for you kind of to feel how you used to feel before the workout, like normally, and then the body will overcompensate, make you stronger. So the idea is, in your week, you should feel more time above that baseline of your typical energy than below. If you're spending whatever you're doing, and it's a combination of other things you're doing in your life, other type of physical activity, whatever you might be doing, but on average, this should improve your energy, not diminish your energy. So you have to go how your body feels. Typically, you don't want to work the same muscle group, same muscles for at least 2-3 days minimum. It's a minimum, even longer, but that's the minimum. But generally, in your week, if you're spending more time above that baseline of energy than below, then you're fine. If you find and you're like tired and the base level of energy is kind of low and getting lower, it's a sign of overtraining. So then you want to dial it down and balance it out.
Thank you. Jill has another question. If I do 2 sessions per week, is it better to do the same set every week for a period of time, or to do 2 different exercise sets?
Can I just have a look at the questions to understand exactly this?
Yeah. If I do 2 sessions every week, is it better to do
2 different type of exercises? Well, it's a very good question. They are probably both right ways to do it, and you can play with it. It's not something, it's not like written in stone. You can do for a while, same exercise, same routine, a couple of times a week for 2-3 months and see how you feel. And then you can do one set of exercises, one workout, and do another workout. The benefits of the second type of exercise for even a similar muscle group, because there are so many different muscles in the body, you won't hit them all in the same workout, but also it's beneficial to target those muscles from different angles. So that's why there's multiple leg exercises, multiple upper body and so on. So both are correct ways. There is no right or wrong. I would suggest, do a period of time of one type of exercise a couple times a week for a few months. And then once you get bored or something, change it up, mix it up, do different ones, and and see how it goes. This is something we all should be doing for the rest of our lives. So there is no rush. There is no like, okay, I need to hurry up, and it's a lifestyle. So it's a long term. Play with it and have fun.
I'll just mention while you're at it that in the book you describe a lot of the exercises in detail with photographs. You've got some you do on your machines and some you can do at home. So here's an example of an illustration of yourself doing one of the exercises at home. So there's a lot of detail, and the reason why I thought to mention it now is because I think you talk about different routines that you can alternate between if you want, and there's other ways to customize your training for yourself.
I might also...
Yeah, it has to be interesting.
So I just wanted to mention, for people who are interested, on Andrei's website, newelementtraining.com, there's a resources tab, and every exercise in the book has been videotaped with Andrei coaching someone through the exercise. And it's a membership. It's I think it's less, it's $10 a month, or just, we're trying to recover our costs, and you can cancel at any time, but you can watch Andrei talk people through every single exercise in the book, which is just another tool to help people feel comfortable with it.
Okay, thank you. William Livingstone is saying slouch with a question mark. Bill, I imagine that you're responding to Philip showing us how the back, you need to support the back, you need to exercise the back so that it doesn't start to your head doesn't start to lean forward as you age. Frida Wong. Jill, she's commenting on what Jill Arbor was asking. Jill, most experts would recommend do upper training 1 time a week and do lower training 1 time a week. So I think we've
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want, go ahead and do it. But and sometimes that's what I do as well. I split my body. Sometimes I do upper, sometimes lower. For the most part, I prefer full body. Just, you know, don't have to be the same exercises, could be different exercises. Just get kind of more metabolic effect overall. But yeah, it's fine. If that's the preference, that's fine.
And you do, in your book, you do suggest a menu that people can follow of the different exercises. And you can pick and choose in different menus. Okay. Frida Wong adds, I've been a regular gym goer for decades. My focus now is on weight training, but I find diet also plays a role in preventing sarcopenia and osteoporosis. I'm primarily vegetarian, so I've had to increase my protein consumption and monitor my intake of calcium, vitamin D, and other supplements. I know collagen production slows down as we age, and it needs to come from animal sources, preferably the area below the skin or shell. I learned our masseter jaw muscles are among the body's strongest, and mastication may lower the risk of dementia. I now drink fewer smoothies in favor of chewing real food. Do the speakers have any advice on nutrition to augment the strength training? So I think
yeah, we talked about it when I talked about diet, eating, right, to emphasize the protein. For vegetarians, it's a bit harder because they're limited in terms of consuming what we call complete proteins, which have enough of the essential amino acids. Basically, a protein is made of 20 amino acids. 11 of them are non-essential, meaning the body makes them. We don't have to really consume them from food. But 9 are so-called essential. And there is a specific ratio of those essential amino acids that matters to stimulate muscle protein synthesis in the most effective way. That's why, generally speaking, any animal-based protein, if you eat it in a sufficient amount, generally 30 grams or more per serving, is enough to deliver those essential amino acids. If someone is not into eating meat or fish or any animal-based food, I would recommend supplementing with either in a whey isolate. And again, if you don't want to do whey isolate, which is derived from dairy, you can purchase what's so-called just pure form of essential amino acids. And many of them are derived from actually vegan sources. So then when you have a meal and you're thinking you're not getting at least 30 plus grams of quality protein, highly recommend having a drink of either just pure form of those 9 essential amino acids we can just buy on Amazon, or whey protein isolate. Just make sure that the muscles are, the signals are there to stimulate the muscle as well, because otherwise you'll get some protein from vegetables and it will go a long way. You need it for your organs to function and everything else to function. The body needs those amino acids for nearly every physiological function in the body. So the proteins and those amino acids are essential for our health. If the body cannot maintain constant supply of those essential amino acids in the blood, the body perishes it. But if you're not getting enough of those through food, then I would highly recommend supplementing with shake or just pure form of essential amino acids, just to make sure there's enough to take care of the muscle as well. Otherwise, you won't turn the switch on to build new muscle protein.
Thank you. Claire McFarland, how do you use this type of strength training if you have an injury, neck or back or leg or foot or other?
You go to us and we work with you personally. It's very complicated. You know, each case is different, and you need expert assessment. And when you do the exercise, you know, you have to have not necessarily come to us, but you know, find a qualified person to offer the service and do it under supervision, because it's too many nuances. So there's no simple answer.
Okay. So in other words, there's an adaptation.
Well, it's because if you're not careful, and if you have, you know, many clients come to us and they have so many different issues, if you do one exercise not the right way, you're gonna trigger undesirable response, and then people feel pain for a day or two. So in order to kind of mitigate it, avoid it, there's too many nuances and, you know, adjustments that you do during the workout not to trigger those responses.
Okay. Gonzalo Bunag in the Philippines. He's responding to Gilles Arbour, but I'll read it anyway. Gilles, there's a sports scientist named Dr. Mike Israetel, who has a YouTube channel named Renaissance Periodization. He posted this video, he gives a link here, about the importance of consistency, i.e. not switching exercises too much. So.
What can I say? You know, exercise field, there's so much noise, but any field, right? There's so many experts, so different papers, and all of them are perhaps right to some degree. There is no need, in my opinion, for what's called periodization, meaning, you know, shocking the muscles different way. The shock is when you go properly, train properly to muscle failure. If not every workout, but every few workouts, you're gonna work muscle harder than before. As the muscles adapt, remodels get stronger, you push in each time when you work out, you're pushing its limit, and so on and so forth. So with our style of training, there's always a fresh stimulus for adaptation. Therefore, you know, you don't need to go fast. You know, I don't want to open the can of worms, but there's lots of experts telling you to do this and this and that, but you can keep it very simple. Just okay.
So basically, when you do this training to failure, you're never habituating. It's always a new.
As long as there is enough recovery time, the workout in itself, if it's done the right way, will stimulate the muscle for adaptation, and then you give sufficient recovery, sufficient nutrition. Come back next time, you should be tiny little bit stronger. So you challenge your muscle again and again, and that goes, you know, for years. As I mentioned, I've been doing it for 10 years, and I'm still somehow getting stronger.
And it follows, you know, it follows the overload principle that, you know, if you're doing a routine with the same weight every week, you do habituate. Your muscles get used to it, and they're not really getting stronger, they're maintaining. But with this, because you're going to failure, that failure point is a moving target. The stronger you get, the longer you go. And so there's not that settling into habituation where the muscle is just doing what's familiar to it.
Okay. Ron Wild, do our guests have any more to say about inflammation?
As we get older, our level of chronic inflammation goes up. It just comes with age. And it actually contributes to sarcopenia, meaning the muscle become less sensitive to adaptation for muscle protein synthesis. How do we manage inflammation? Well, one of the myokines that generated during the workout, during the exercise, is so-called interleukin-6. It actually chronically a bad kind of cytokine that increases inflammation. But when we generate it acutely in the form of acute exercise stressor, it activates on the other end several other anti-inflammatory myokines. So therefore, exercise in general lowers our chronic inflammation, because just by the activation of these anti-inflammatory myokines. I would highly recommend as well, not only when I talk about protein supplementation of ways, and also taking fish oil. Fish oil shown over and over and over to be very potent anti-inflammatory agent. And in fact, even in strength training and elder age showed to also make muscles stronger faster, versus when you compare to the group of people who doesn't take fish oil. So, you know, there's many more, of course, aspects to it, but in our context, you know, with strength training, generally inflammation should go down. That's what the science points out. And, you know, supplement with fish oil on top of it, and your chronic inflammation should go down.
Thank you. Laura King comments, I love the metaphor of pouring air into the body like water into a jug. And Danny Gagnon, she's in Montreal. It was very interesting, and it will be hard not to buy the book. Mona Hassi in Edmonton, thank you so much. Really appreciated such a deep session. Susan Joelle Coleman, a wonderful session. Thank you for the understanding and the inspiration. I've just purchased the ebook and look forward to a better life. And Jen of Giovanni Pepe, he's in Mississauga. You mentioned several times that your workouts are low intensity because it's based on slow, deliberate movements. There's been a lot of research published in the last decade stating that one of the healthiest forms of exercise is high-intensity interval training, HIIT, which involves complex, engaging multiple muscle groups at once, and high-energy burst-like movements. Besides the low-intensity versus high-intensity nature of the workouts, how is your method different from HIIT, and what pros and cons can you share about your method in comparison to HIIT?
Could I start? And
Yes.
and I know Andrei's got a lot to say about this. There's a basic misunderstanding. We don't describe our workout as low intensity. It's low impact. It's high intensity, and it's in the tradition of what's called high intensity strength training. We've taken that tradition and refined it, added principles to it, and the mindful element to it. High intensity interval training is basically a form of sprint, rest, sprint, rest. It's a wonderful form of training. It does activate the powerhouse muscles, the fast twitch. But where it has a limitation is you can do it running, you can do it rowing, you can do it cycling. There are many ways of doing high intensity interval training, but none of those forms of high intensity interval training is able to bring all the major muscle groups of the body to failure. And there's so much benefit to doing that. I'd say that for me is one of the main comparisons between the two. But Andrei, I'm sure you've got a lot more to say about it.
Well, just a couple more additions to what you just said. HIIT, the sprint-based form of workout, is great. So there are similarities. The danger of that, when you sprint all out, if you're a bit older, you're gonna have much likelihood of hurting yourself. What's gonna happen when you pull a tendon or joint? Well, then you're on the bench for a few months, try to recover, and then you're getting out of shape again. So that's one of these kind of cons of, you have to be careful. If you're healthy and your joints can handle it safely, incorporate it. Do our style of high intensity strength training, incorporate it with HIIT, do once a week this, once or twice a week that, whatever, and they're both great. I believe in our workout, when you do just our workout, you kind of getting all the benefits HIIT, this sprint-based offers, but you're getting more just because you work in full body rather than just working the lower body, upper body, which typically would happen in that kind of workout.
So just to clarify, what do you mean again by low impact, which is what you have in your method?
Yes. So the most dangerous form of exercise is the one that involves high impact, high acceleration movement. Why? Because what's force, again, is mass time acceleration. So by increasing acceleration, by definition, increase the force. We want to end up with healthy joints, not just now, but only 20 years from now. We don't want to develop arthritis in the joints from this high impact movement. Ideal kind of exercise, just from the joint health point of view, is the one that generates the least impact on the joint, and yet of sufficient enough intensity to stimulate the adaptations you try to gain from the exercise. And that's why exercise is different. It's a slow movement, means it's a low impact, so it's a very gentle on your joints, if you particularly know how to move your body the right way. And at the same time, it stimulates all the positive adaptations. So there's multiple ways to get the benefits, but there's also a question of safety. And what we propose is super, super safe.
Gary and Kathy Kurt, I think you're in Mississauga. Thank you so much for a fantastic, very informative session. Mark McWilliam, I just bought the book. Robert Burton, recommended rep range to failure, and Arthur Jones, Nautilus founder, recommended 6 reps. What do you think?
Our methodology originated with Arthur Jones, so I'm great that Robert actually knows a little bit history. It came from the Nautilus and Arthur Jones. If not for Arthur Jones, we wouldn't be talking here today. And they've done research not that long ago at McMaster University, where they demonstrated as long as you train to muscle exhaustion using, it doesn't really matter that much if you use moderate weight or heavy weight, as long as they achieve muscle exhaustion. If you use heavy weight, we don't count repetitions, we use a stopwatch, we measure time under load. So typically, if you use semi-heavy weight, will take you between 70 to 90 minutes before you reach exhaustion, full muscle failure. If you use moderate weights, it might take you 3 minutes. But as long as you achieve muscle exhaustion, muscle failure, where there's going to be 1.5 to 3 minutes, there's really not that much difference. Like at least the research, they couldn't find the difference. They concluded that in both groups, they achieved this very similar physiological adaptation. So the rep count is less important. What's important is to safely bring muscle to the point of failure. It could be 6 reps if you're fairly advanced, and that means you're going to use fairly heavy weights. I would not recommend a beginner to do that, because that means the weights are going to be too heavy, and the form is not going to be as good, and you minimally won't do it right, might even hurt yourself. So everybody who just beginning, I recommend using moderate resistance, learn the exercise, learn the movement. Don't even worry about the failure yet until you really understand the form and the technique. And then gradually make it heavier and harder over time.
I might just add my personal experience. The workout I've been doing for a while is basically 1.5 reps. And what it is I lift the weight, and over 30 seconds, I lower it. And over the next 30 seconds, I raise it. And over the next 30 seconds, I lower it. And then I just go a little further if I can until I hit failure. So that's way less than 6 reps, but it's very, very effective. And again, I'm using the stopwatch. And if I can do time under load and keep going for much more than 2 minutes, I add a little weight, and that brings my time back down again.
Thank you. Randy Beaton in Switzerland. Thank you both for the in-depth explanations. I'm finding this topic very interesting and will most definitely get the book. And William Livingstone asks how many participants, and I will say lots. This is one of the most successful, highly attended webinars that we've had. So congratulations to Philip and to Andrei for that. That's very nice. So I think this will, at this time, we'll bring the session to a close. I'm really pleased that you were both here and that the transmission worked well. Andrei is with us from a mountain high in Costa Rica at the moment, and the reception was pretty good. And so it all went well. I'm happy about that. And thank you to the audience for being here. Your questions are really good. And you've hung in to the end, as I see. So I'm going to end the session now, and thank you both very much, and thank the audience very much.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much. Stay strong.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Kathleen.
Okay. Thank you. Bye now.
Okay,
Bye-bye.